So let me take you back to a moment that changed the way I see the world. It was a quiet Sunday morning, and I decided to try bird watching for the very first time after taking an inspiration from an ecology class with Professor Colin Hitchcock. I armed with nothing else than just a field guide, I started to walk all around campus before settling into Chapel's Pond. And first, I was a bit skeptical, honestly. I was very restless, scanning all the trees, moving around a lot, seeing one or two silhouettes of birds flying really up high, but nothing truly extraordinary was happening. But then, something shifted. I began to listen, to really listen. A chirp led me to a tiny bird perched on a branch, its feathers glinting on the sunlight. And I held my breath as I was captivated by its delicate movements. For those few seconds, everything else disappeared. The noise on the street, my to-do list, and even time itself. It was just me and the bird. That morning, I realized something really profound, that slowing down to observe that house finch created a space for stillness. And from that, birdwatching became more than just a hobby for me. It was a way for me to reclaim calmness, to be present, and to connect myself with the place that I was living on. But this story isn't just about one bird or one moment. It's about what that encounter sparked. A new way of living, a new way of understanding my place and the place of others in this world. One that is connecting yourself with nature in a much deeper way. So today I want to walk you through why bird watching matters and why I think it's one of the most powerful and accessible ways for us to create new or renew our relationships with nature. Oh, and this bird watching has become such an important activity for me that I've now regularly photographed them, and I've included some of the photos throughout the presentation. So in today's always-on culture, slowness is seen as a luxury. We barely take time for ourselves. We only see that as something that we can achieve after something great. But in reality, slowness is something essential. And to do bird watching, it requires you to slow down. And when you do so, you become more aware of everything else. And your time to place yourself within that environment becomes much more subtle. It invites us to pace ourselves based on the rhythms of nature instead of the urgency of urban life. And studies confirm the mental health benefits of doing this kind of activity. One tells us that spending only 20 minutes walking through a greener area can reduce the levels of cortisol in your body, which is the hormone associated with stress. The other one tells us that moving to greener areas, or for the matter, just spending more time in them, can also reduce the rates of depression. And the third says that bird songs, listening to them in particular, have been shown to improve mood and also reduce anxiety. But bird watching is more than just your personal mental health benefits. It's also a form of social care, one that actively contributes to emotional resilience and it strengthens our social connections. This is especially true when you go out with others. When you do this kind of group activity, you create this shared memories that stays with you for the long run, whether it's spotting a species you've never seen before, or just laughing at the quirks of a particular bird, or even at each other. When you do this kind of things, your relationship with the environment changes, and consequently, your relationship with others changes too. But bird watching does more than just soothe our minds. It also creates a sense of belonging to all of us, not only to people, but also to place. When you start doing this kind of activity, you start noticing the subtleness of each bird. You start to notice their habits, their struggles, and most importantly, the environment that they depend on. And suddenly, nature isn't just something out there, it's something that you're a part of. And when you feel this sense of belonging, you also feel a sense of care. And when you care, most likely you're going to feel a sense of responsibility. And with responsibility, most likely you're also going to try to act for the preservation of that. But before we can go into action, we got to understand how we've been taught to relate to nature in the very first place. For too long, dominant systems, namely capitalism and colonialism, have promoted this idea that nature is something to be extracted, to be controlled, or overly managed for human benefit. Land, wildlife, water, they all become just commodities instead of full living beings. And in this culture of extraction and appropriation, we live in a world in which we live in a world in which convenience often triumphs. The sounds of notification in your cell phone drowns out the calls of the birds. Forests are cleared out for profit, and the environment is seen as something that is a mere resource, not something that you can really have a relationship with. And in this idea, nature is something that you simply visit, but not really something that you are a part of, a community that you can feel and belong to. But the most interesting aspect of all this is that these mindsets, which have been very dominant throughout most time or most centuries, can be changed. And the question is, how do we do it? Well, the first thing is to, and the most important, rethink our relationship with nature in the very first place. And to do so, I have some ideas of how we can do that. First, we can take respectful inspiration from indigenous cultures in which have long seen nature as a complex network of kinship rather than just a resource that you can take from. And for example, in the Andes, the Quechua concept of sumak kwaisai, or good living in translation, tells us that the harmony for society centers in the idea of having humans, animals, and land living in connection with each other, a sustainable connection. Another example comes from some First Nations in what's now called Australia, but they tells us that some birds are seen as messengers and teachers. And humans can take inspiration from those. It really goes to show how humans can learn from non-humans. And that's exactly where birdwatching comes from. That's exactly where birdwatching, when approached with care, can really take a step back and help us. We can also see this in academia, where some post-colonial scholars have shown us that, We can also see this in academia, where some post-colonial scholars such as Vandana Shiva and Ngugi wa Thiong'o have shown us that colonialism strips communities away from this harmonious mindset. And in those places, they put up an extractive logic. And for them, true sustainability only comes from an understanding of an attentiveness to that environment, not of dominance. And that's exactly where birdwatching, when approached with care, can become such a powerful tool for all of us. And when you start noticing those habits, when you start going out and really pay attention to them, you start becoming more attuned to everything else that's changing. So you become more attuned to species decline, habitat loss, even disrupting seasons. And with that awareness, most likely comes responsibility. And hopefully, with that comes some sort of action. And the thing is that understanding these and really putting this into action is only the beginning. Because a mindset, a shift on perspective means little if it stays only theoretical. The idea is to really get yourself out there and put all of this into action. Because connection only comes through direct engagement, mindful engagement, one that is based on true engagement and true putting yourself out there. And well, that's where birdwatching is great to do that, because it offers a very accessible and immediate way to start. You don't need to go to a distant forest to do that. You can do it in your backyard. And that's exactly why what I invite you to try it. You don't need fancy equipment. You don't need anything crazy. You can just go somewhere on campus, on a park, as I said, on your backyard, or even just look outside your window. When you start doing this, you become more aware of our surroundings. You become more observant, and you start to listen way more. And not only that slows you down and creates a sense of calmness, but it also creates this connection with the natural environment that's surrounding you. And you can start calling that place home, even if that place is already home. So this becomes a great place and a great space for all of us to reconnect with nature and to really think, how do we move through the world? And how do we become present in it? And I hopefully, with this talk, made you a bit more interested in becoming more harmonious with the planet that we all share. So the next time that you go outside, look up, listen, observe very carefully, because the birds have always been there. We just have to slow down enough to see them. Thank you.